I'm Derek Wheatley, and welcome to episode 87 of the Wheatley podcast. Thank you very much for joining us, as always. Thank you very much to Tracy, Ginny, Nicola, and Joanne, got all the names right, for coming on last week and doing a quiz with us, because it was great crack and we got some great feedback. And I heard that a couple of people were actually doing the quiz on their own at home when they listen to it, because it's very interesting to kind of figure out your favorite songs and your favorite movies and stuff. And we'll probably be talking a bit about that later on in this episode. So subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't done so. It's always very helpful. We got a couple more people in last week. And for your continued support, thanks as always. We'll get into the episode. I want to introduce my guest. He's a musician, I nearly said, and a carer, and his name is Tadhg Keller. How are you doing, Tadhg?
I'm good.
Thank you very much for joining us. You're a busy man, I know that, and we're just going to get into it, Tadhg, right? So, a short history of your upbringing, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. So I grew up in Athlone. I went to the Mars Primary School. Started playing music first when I was probably about 5 or 6, piano lessons, but I quit after the few piano. Took up the guitar when I was about 10. Started bands in my teens, so around 13, 14. A lot of Nirvana. And then went to the community college. And after that, I went over to London. Upbringing, fairly normal, I'd say. But then at the same time, my dad, he's a physics lecturer, and I think he might be a bit on the spectrum. Okay. And I think I might be a bit on the spectrum too,
Okay.
As not like there's always kind of suspicion of like autism or Asperger's or some version, but Dad has a lot of these kind of obsessive like kind of traits as well, but he's into physics and space and stuff like that. Anyway, I'm just saying that as we'd have bedtime stories at nighttime, but Dad would be giving you bedtime lectures about black holes, and I swear he'd be talking about Stephen Hawking, all this sort of stuff, and it fairly blew my mind, when you're 6 or 7 years old and this is your bedtime stories, but it was great fun. There was never any shame or anything in our family. Like, there was, if you're a bit weird, you're a bit weird, like, and they all supported everything I was doing, and especially with music, and a lot of people told me I should have been doing, the maths or the accounts and stuff. I just wanted to do music, and they supported me every step, like, so a good upbringing,
Yeah. You put up a video of your dad last week, and I recognized your dad, and I was kind of like, when you recognize someone, but you can't fit the place that you would see him, obviously in Athlone, and but you can't quite fit the place you've seen him. So I said to my dad, do you know this man on my phone, and my dad said, yeah, he's very, very intelligent man. And that's what he is straight away when he saw your dad. Thanks very much for we want to get someone on to talk about autism and Asperger's and stuff, because it's such a, there's such a huge spectrum that to narrow it down to like 2 single words, which we all do, because it's just lack of knowledge on our parts, really. So I'd like to get someone on to talk specifically about that, because it would be very, beneficial for a lot of people out there, I think. And it's important to kind of be more, I suppose, receptive to things like that. But so, Tadhg, for you then, when did you first become aware of mental health?
Okay, so I suppose I would have had my first mental health problems before you become aware of how to deal with it. And I would have had the typical ones, in your teens, with friends, girlfriends, bands. It was very dog eat dog. And it was It really was like a kind of survival game too, because a band would get together and then something would happen. They'd break up, maybe when you're like 15, 16, 17, and everyone they'd stop playing music altogether, because they'd be so disheartened with the experience, and you're fighting and you're in competition because there's no gigs, Probably remember we had, like, they'd have underage gigs, and everyone would be fighting for a slot, and you'd be fighting to get the guitarist from the other band or the drummer, and then everyone gives up, when they're going into, after school and stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, mental health problems that causes, because, you're feeling kind of, yeah, that sense of in competition with the only other people in your scene,
Yeah.
I found that very hard, especially kind of maybe when I went over to London and you're kind of grieving the bands, and it's like, oh, I'm not going to be famous now, and that happens. And every couple of years you get into another band, and but okay, so yeah, I go off on tangents.
No, but listen, but I just want to talk to you because you did mention music to me when we were texting, and you said that was the first case of it, the mental health kind of thing. Was it the fact that you mentioned about being famous there? Was it the fact that you were trying to, because we all were, anybody who was in bands were trying to become famous, but every time a band broke up, it is very, very disheartening. You think that's it, and then you grasp onto the next thing and you go again.
Yeah. But I think it starts when you're very young, and you start playing music, and a relative in Ireland will always say, "We'll see you on the Top of the Pops." And when you're a kid, you're like, "What? I have that, what's the Top of the Pops?" But it's something that it's expectation, and people are saying, "Oh, you're great," but some of them are kind of taking the mick out of you,
Yeah.
And you're always been this expectation, So it's the expectation that's built in, that it's not really that clamor for fame. It's just like, I'm after taking out the guitar here, and tell everyone, oh, look, I want to play guitar for my life, and then it's that expectation of how do I actually do this,
There's expectation, and then there's obviously the constant disappointment of it, and the constant of kind of when you get to a certain age, I suppose, and you realize that it's not going to happen, and then it's such a shock to the system because you keep thinking that it will, and then when it's like the grown up in you or the maturity in you says it's not going to be music for you. It really pulls the carpet out from underneath you, doesn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, it's a good thing too, though, when you kind of go through it, and it's like, okay, you know what, I can just be a human, I don't need to entertain all the time. So that was probably the genesis of my first mental health problems, was disappointment in myself, that disappointment that I didn't live to the expectations of the imaginary voices in my head.
Yeah, I know that feeling. And so first of all, I want to mention David Boyce, because David was the one that told me, got in touch with me and said that it might be worth giving you a shout to see if you come on to chat. So thank you to Boyce for that. But what was it that, because he pointed out that you were talking more about your own mental health on your Facebook page and that, what was it that kind of prompted that for you?
Yeah, it was when I got the message of David Boyce. I was kind of surprised first, because I never really mentioned anything about mental health, or I tell you, I went for therapy for 2 years before the next chapter, So I was dealing with all of the leftovers of the young life, so all the friendships, girlfriends, expectations, and I'm becoming an adult now, you know, and my parents were kind of health was going down a bit, so it was great therapy. Have you ever heard stand play?
No.
All this Jungian sort of stuff,
Okay.
subconscious exploration, and I've done that for 2 years. And by the end of that, I was so zen, you know, because it was like I had explored everything, all the dark. But when you're doing the sand play, you're doing it in a really creative way, like, you know, it's all these figures, you know, and a tray of sand, and you create these scenes, and your subconscious just starts acting up, like, you know, or not acting up, but exploring all these ideas in your head. And it's a great way to work through any issues.
Right.
I've lost my train of thought again.
No, but it's just it's well, I suppose. So you don't think when you were talking, you putting stuff up on Facebook, you don't think it was, you know, Boise saw a mental health thing in it where you didn't see it.
Yeah. Okay. Now I remember what it was at. So yeah. So I had a big experience with mental health, and 2 years ago I thought I was Eckhart Tolle. You know, I was like totally sorted and zen. And then this where the story will get a bit dark, you know, and a bit, you know. But 1st of December 2019, I was living out on a farm. I had a small little farm. I was growing my potatoes and totally happy. I mean, super zen. And then I came in that morning to visit my mum and dad, and my mum had passed away.
Oh, man.
So and dad was in a really kind of hectic, kind of chaotic state. It was a warning sign that there was. So at the same time I found my mum, I noticed there was something up with my dad.
Okay.
You know, and then
Right.
and your brain just goes into this like it's like I can't start screaming or panicking. I have to mind dad because he's in a, you know, and you totally disconnect, you know, because you're in the minutes. You know, I'm just after finding my mum, and she no one expected, you know, it was a sudden death, you know. She was just lying up in bed. And that started, I moved in from the house, from the farm into the home house the next day. And I've been here ever since.
Yeah.
You know, so it's been about 2 years. And the first year was so chaotic because, and I'll go into it a bit more in a minute, but I just want to get to the point of
Yeah, no problem.
why Boise is mentioned and what I'm talking about mental health. And Boise is the craziest person I've ever met.
I know that.
In the best, most beautiful way, I can
Yeah.
say. You know, so he'd be able to recognize. You
Yeah.
know. So during the pandemic and lockdown and all this, I had to really come to terms with the reality of my situation, and there was no therapy, you know, that I could do for this. You know, it wasn't, you know, afraid of the voices in my head or the people that were having expectation of me to go on top of the pops.
Yeah.
It was like I have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you know, and I have to start cleaning the house then, and I have to do everything minute by minute, or as things would go. It was real hardship. Not, I don't even like that word because some people had it far worse than I had. Like, but it was more of a real mental health thing. But then I had a turn where it was like, you know, I need to change my own narrative here, you know, because I'm falling into this trap of, you know, I went into the caring role. It was overwhelming me. You know, you hear the stories, like horror stories of carers, you know, who go into it, and it overwhelms them straight away because it's hard. Like it's 24/7, months and months on end. And you know, it's you hear stories of like carers dying before the people they're caring for, and you know, and then they have other like breakdowns and lose the run of themselves, you know, start taking the medication that the carers, you know.
Yeah.
But I was like, I have to change this. This isn't going to be my life, because I had gotten to such a good place, you know, and I had a full career and everything was going good. And it turned me, I said, you know what? I'm going to really focus on that now. And I'm going to do like the guitar or the piano, and I'm going to become the best carer I can possibly be, you know? And it was just like I had to put the blinders on or the blinkers and just get to work. So I think that influenced probably the posts I would have put up in the last year, where it was like, do you know, I'm not going to have any private posts, or I'm not going to hide away things. I'm just going to post publicly, say about my life the way it is, and good or bad. Like, I have a bad day, I had a good day. Good days are great, you know, and we make progress with that, or, you know, and bad days are bad as well. So
yeah, could I ask with some sort of naivety on my part, from the therapy that you did, can you take that into the kind of situation you're in now? Is there any kind of tools you can take from that and use in this situation?
Definitely, if I didn't do the therapy, I wouldn't have been able to enter into this and to keep it going. The I suppose I just become more aware of like the process behind my thinking, you know. So I always take a step outside, because when you get emotional thinking, you know, and you just get angry, you know, and you get like, I've had 6 coffees this morning, and you know, that makes me get them up and down and dressed and stuff like that. That's emotion. That's chemicals, you know. That's not. You know, it's not bad thoughts or bad upbringing. It's just like hectic, like, you know. So just becoming aware of the different states, man, and always being able to take a step back and say, okay, it's like you're in kind of crazy mode there, you know, ease off the coffee, or play some music, or just an outside point of view.
Yeah. I think that's because I asked that kind of question in my own sense, that I can, with the therapy that I've had myself, you know, I'm able to kind of dip back in when needed. It doesn't work at all times, obviously, but there's still, like you said, it has changed your thought process with some things. So you are able to use it when it's essential to use it in certain situations, obviously. You've had this, you know, such a terrible thing to happen like 2 years ago. And then, you know, throw a pandemic on top of it, you know, into the mix, and it becomes something that, you know, when Boise talked to me about it, and I obviously friended you on Facebook and that, and it got me kind of thinking about the situation of being, you know, a carer, full-time carer, in a no relief situation, I guess. And you talked a bit about that, the fact that like respite and things like that, you've been vocal about that. That's been difficult for you to get, I suppose.
Yeah.
Right.
So I all this stuff I had to learn, you know, about rest. I didn't know what respite was. I didn't know what that word meant, you know. Like, respite is a break for people who take care of other people. And it's like a break every couple of months. Like, in the government will give you a break, you know, they will fund you a break once a year. Most nursing homes, they might set aside a week or two for you every year, and that's what's expected, like 2 week break. And you hear about carers, I'm getting my 2 weeks next week, you know, and then you're expected to do it 24/7.
Yeah.
Like, there's kind of, with the COVID, of course, and all the rest, like, got shut down. I'm just gonna turn that off for a second.
Yeah, no problem, Tadhg, no problem.
Yeah, sorry.
You're all good. I'm just looking at the guitars in the background there.
I just bought a new guitar.
Did you really? Yeah.
First time I bought a guitar since I was about 15.
Seriously?
Yeah.
That's surprising.
And almost the same guitar I bought when I was 15 because it got stolen on me a few years, or I shouldn't assume that. I probably lost it.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's very honest. But, sorry there, Tadhg. So you're about the respite and stuff, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So there's no respite.
Yeah.
That all put down. So it was like an unfolding learning that this is going to get tougher and tougher, you know. I suppose I didn't really think about respite for the first lockdown, but then after the first lockdown, then we kind of got the diagnosis that Dad had dementia. So it was terrible to get that.
Yeah.
But all the same, it was good because at least I was able to understand.
Okay.
He had a stroke 20 years ago, so he was already losing the movement on his left side. But now there was kind of, more confusions going on, like time and stuff like that, and going to bed at different times. So it started getting really, really, and this is what I kind of suspected when I said I found my mum that day, and Dad was in there's signs, but I wouldn't have noticed it because my mum was dealing with it, so this started really acting up, and especially with the lockdown, and he didn't see anyone, so he had that loneliness. I was with him all the time, but that's you need other people, so it really it would accelerate in these different ways, where Dad would get confused, and then he wouldn't get sleep, and then I wouldn't get sleep, and then he'd be put on medication to get him to sleep, and I'd be put on medication, It just got almost the worst it got was about 2 weeks during the second lockdown, and neither of us slept, and I was actually put on antidepressants at the time, and I started using the antidepressants to stay awake because my dad was falling during the night.
Okay.
And I had this anxiety of, I can't sleep because if I sleep, my dad's going to fall, and and that's when I suppose the worst it came to. That's the point where you're like, okay, I can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
Because one of us is going to die.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we didn't get respite. I just took a lot of just endurance. You do sports, I think, training and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Not me, really. I once did a swimming thing,
oh, really? Okay.
I loved it. It was swimming for an hour and a half every day, and endurance. If you can get into a mindset of, okay, I'm halfway through this,
Yeah.
and you're like, man, I'm just after doing 6 months without a day off, minding my dad, it's like, and then you're like, okay, it's only another 4 months until the vaccine or something like that. And we finally got respite after 20 months.
I mean, my experience, Tadhg, just from next door, my landlady has had, her mother had a stroke, and unfortunately she passed away a couple of years ago, but her dad is now, getting respite, but it's just an hour every morning, and I say it's just an hour every morning, but how big that is for Anne, for the nurse to go in and just dress Tommy Joe and put on his shoes and things like that. That's huge for Anne because she can get her day in motion. You're talking about 20 months of nothing, no help, a pandemic going on at the moment. I can't get my head into that, because it's like you say about endurance, okay? So if I'm running 10 kilometers and I'm halfway through, I'm 5 kilometers through, and I know there's 5 left. If you don't have anything in sight, it's like you're outrunning, but there's no finish line. that's about the easiest and best way I can describe it. I can't imagine the stress. I wanted to ask you about sleep, because you mentioned sleep, because everybody knows what they're like when they miss a day of sleep. Not only yourself, and then your dad misses it as well, but you talk about the confusion of times of sleep. So you say your dad's going to sleep during the day, you have to go to sleep during the day. That's your, like, is that the way it works out?
Well, it's just sometimes he'd mix up the day, and like he's doing really well now at the moment.
Good.
But a couple of weeks ago, I'd put him to bed about 9 o'clock, and I thought, I'm gonna go upstairs, chill out for an hour. And then 5 minutes later, he called me, Tadhg. He says, time to get up. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm so convinced, I was like, it's 9 o'clock at night. I was like, get up, get me up. So I had to get him up, and I had to get him dressed, and I had to bring him into the kitchen, and I had to show him that it was dark outside and that the 24-hour clocks, and go through all that and then get back in bed. So just things like that happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes he just starts getting up at 2 o'clock, or 3 o'clock, and that's it. You're up then for the day, and so you have to just maintain a steady kind of calm and not really reacting things, and allowing him to have bad days, and allowing me to have bad days too. It's like the only finishing line we had was the vaccine.
Yeah.
I thought, if I get as far as the vaccine, at least people will stop thinking I'm going to kill my dad from COVID,
Yeah.
And it was the first time we left the house after when we were cocooned. That was about 6 months. Then we left the house. People started giving me eyeballs, It's like, look at him, he's out with an old man.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
Because the old people were really like, what's the word? There was a taboo about old people.
Yeah.
It's like they're all going to die. Well,
yeah.
Sorry, I kind of a very
No, we know what you. No, don't. We know what you. Yeah, we know exactly what you mean, because we all think of the same thing though. Like, and it's the, and we were told, not just old people, but old people who, maybe in a wheelchair or whatever it might be, they were the most vulnerable ones. So I probably did it. When I'm walking around, when I see, and it was probably not me judging the person, but me going, oh God, like, because I hadn't seen it, and we weren't supposed to see that kind of thing around, So what has it been, since the vaccines kind of situation? Obviously can people come over and visit you then? Is there? It's okay now.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So it's been, and we had a great crack too during the lockdown and the bad time. Like when it was us exploring, Dad was still on the scooter, and I'd be on the bike, and we'd go down the Greenway. And I remember one day we went for about 5K somewhere, got completely lost, and Dad battery nearly went. We nearly got stranded, and moments like that. It's like,
yeah,
we're in the middle of the apocalypse. I'm about to get stranded with my dad out.
It's funny because it's all, from the outside, looking from the outside, it's all doom and gloom is what we think, because we try and put ourselves in the position. We always picture the hardest parts, and we very rarely think of those parts that you're talking about, where there's a light relief, and the relationship between you and your father going back and to now, there's so much to it. It's and I'm glad to hear that he's doing good, and obviously, obviously appreciate you coming on and being, talking about it as well, because I haven't had a carer on the podcast, and it's, like we've said already, at the times that we're in, it's pretty difficult to imagine the situation that you were in, and how tough it was. Listen, we will probably go back and forth on the conversation. We will talk a bit about music now, if that's all right. But before that, Tadhg, I just want to get the advert in so we can get it out of the way and have a proper chat about it. So, Fusion Training Centre, Monksland Athlone, a place to train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing, martial arts, and CrossFit. A great atmosphere with experienced coaches and a real sense of community. If you want to join the team, find us on Facebook at Fusion Training Centre or drop in for a chat. Fusion Training Centre, train like a warrior. Like it's open. Obviously, it's open now, but it's open fuller now. There's more people in CrossFit. There's newer people in jiu-jitsu, newer people in kickboxing. It's great to see people coming back in. It's great for Martin, and yeah, come in and do something different and see how you get on. Talking about endurance, see how we do. So Tadhg, I'm so happy Nirvana were already mentioned, but we're gonna go back. We're going to go back. So what you started playing music when you were obviously very young. Like what was it what or who inspired you to start?
There was music in the family.
Okay.
My uncles and my grandfather. So there was always pianos around. And I suppose from 4 or 5, I was going up to the pianos and hitting notes and all that. And then I was put into piano lessons very young, like, probably about 5 or 6. With Miss Flanagan, she passed away a few years ago, but it was for me, music was all about imagination. I remember going to the piano when I was a kid and hearing sounds and thinking, oh, this sounds like this place or this place, and it was all imagination. And then when I went into the learning environment, and I found it just I don't like this, and also my mother actually, she always reminded me that I wanted to quit piano lessons, and I told her, because everyone in schools called me a pansy.
Okay.
Because I'm doing piano lessons. So I quit piano.
Yeah.
But like, you're 5 or 6, it's like, but I always kept playing piano.
Yeah, all right, okay.
But then, but I just was teaching myself, I couldn't read. Then I had a babysitter when I was about 9 or 10. And there was a guitar in the house, and she taught me Smells Like Teen Spirit on 1 string on the guitar.
Yeah.
And suddenly I had something new to show off to the lads. Like, ding, 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 ding. And then me and my friends started kind of, I learned this Nirvana, this Offspring song, or a very limited range, of bands we were listening to. And then my dad, going back, this is music related too, but he was one of the first people with access to the internet out in the RTC.
Right.
I still today have no idea how he discovered tabs, or that there was tabs. Guitar music, just for anyone who doesn't know what it is, the key to learning.
Yeah.
He was able to find out that there was tabs on the internet, and he doesn't do anything with music. He went out to the college, and this would have been 96, kind of, maybe not that early, but I remember we went out to college and he printed me off the tabs to every single Nirvana song.
Yeah.
Like that, I'm sure that was illegal in many ways, and copyright and all this, but I basically locked myself in my room for 6 months, and this was just the most beautiful thing in the world, learning this thing, and it was all like teaching yourself, and it was the music you liked, and every time you could go back, I learned another song, and I became obsessed.
Do you know what I love about when people talk about Nirvana? Because I want to ask you about your guitar. I know it's a crap question, right? But the guitar playing style, and I asked this right off the back of when I was very young, right? So I was about 8 or 9. Okay, so I was listening to Metallica at the time and Guns N' Roses. They were the 2 huge bands, and I obviously I really liked them. And then Nirvana came along, and I thought to myself that I was wasting my time with the other 2 bands because I didn't like these guitar solos that went on for ages, and I liked sloppiness in the guitar playing, and I like to be, if there's 5 notes in a solo, good. If it sounds, this whole thing, if there's a bit of, I think even Kurt Cobain talked about just the being, if it's sloppy or it's good and it has passion, that's what I liked. And I've never really gone back to the solo thing, and I've always been someone who's really, into the idea of the guitar as more than just solos, and I wanted to be like a kind of a soundscape thing, which like the Verve used, and even U2 use that kind of thing. So what for you? Obviously, Nirvana came first, but did you start to drift into the 5-minute solo at any point?
Oh, I did, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think it was Metallica, Guns N' Roses. I loved the punk noise. And then I started getting guitar lessons. First with Richie Brown, great guitar player. And then he wanted to move me on to Willie Kiernan. And I remember I waited for about 6 months on the waiting list, everyone was talking about, this is the guitar teacher,
Yeah.
So I took it very seriously when I started the lessons, and it's the same as a whole new world, and there's all these theory and scales, and I think I got into it more on. I don't think I ever mastered that stuff, with the scales or like that, but I loved the kind of academic side of it and just how music worked. And I would have had a few years of getting into like Joe Satriani and Steve Vai, but it's not that, like, I am a sloppy player, and I'm known to be a sloppy player. I am ridiculously lazy when it comes. I done a cover band once, and I just always get in trouble because I wouldn't learn songs. I'm not a professional musician. But it was just because I liked the solos, but I always have a thing where it's like I don't want to repeat what someone is doing. I need to find what's the newer thing. So just as I was kind of learning that fast sort of stuff, I started listening to acoustic players, put the electric down for a few years and always try moving on, and once I saw, okay, I've had enough of this sort of, so I try and learn something new, but like the fancy stuff, it's I'm very conscious about. It's like if you're having a conversation with someone, if you can have the best vocabulary in the world, but if you haven't anything to say, you're not gonna. Well, if someone mightn't have that much vocabulary, but they have something to say, they will say it. It's like. I try and balance this, have a good vocabulary and have something important to say.
Yeah.
So I don't really care about scales or, well, I do, I want to get fast,
Yeah, I don't want to embarrass Tadhg, right? But we were talking before the podcast. I don't want to embarrass him, but I will. But basically, when I was in bands, Tadhg was always someone who I heard about as a guitar player in the town. Richie Brown, obviously, I heard a lot about Richie Brown. Willie Kiernan was another one. I used to go see him in Nuts Corner on a Monday night. Another great guitar player. But I've always you don't always know that there's a style in a player. It's not like a player can be absolutely brilliant, but it's copied from a style, like it's copied from some particular guitarist, and you can see that in them, and that's brilliant. And what you talked about vocabulary, and having something to say, and a guitar player can go to that, can use that kind of analogy. And I was always fascinated by somebody like Nick McCabe in the Verve, because a guy did not want to be on stage, clearly had no interest in being on stage. He stood right back behind his speaker almost till you couldn't see him. But his guitar playing and his sound was everything in the Verve at certain points. And it was this huge soundscape, and he's allowed to kind of paint what he wants to paint. And when I think of really great guitar players, that's what I think of Tadhg. And I've seen you play guitar. I've obviously seen you do it online and stuff like that. When you played live and you stood up there, was there ever a sense of this? I don't mean this in a bad way, by the way. But is there ever a sense of oh, look at me, I'm Tadhg, I'm really good on the guitar? Is it like a group gang dynamic? Can you do both?
Yeah, it's like I like would have been very nervous for groups with people in general. And if I'm the person that if there's a circle of people, I'm on the outside of the circle, kind of walking around, trying to dip my head in.
Yeah.
I just if I'm in a pub or it's yeah, I try my best, to be social, but I was just bad at it. But then I got this thing that when I got on stage, it was like I could get lost in my own world, and look up every now and again, and you see people are having fun, or they'd be moshing, or they'd be dancing, or shifting, and I was like, this is amazing because and I can stay in my bubble and still have all this like the confidence that I don't have in the normal situation,
Yeah.
So it's funny because it's like ego is there, like you learn about your ego, later that like it's there that's trying to push you along, and sometimes, especially when you're around that 15, 16, 17,
Yeah.
And same with the competition, in the town. It's like I want to be the best. When I went over to London, then it was, you know what, you're not the best, but the ego thing kind of subsides.
Yeah.
But it's still a great buzz, like that's no better feeling than when you're on stage, and
yeah,
it's the communication, like sorry, I kind of lost myself there again.
You're good. No, you're good. There's to kind of go off the back of that, I guess. We talked a bit, a lot about mindfulness on this podcast, and I used to hate the word, and oh God, I used to hate the idea of it. And then I realized that it's in everything, and it can be in everything if you want it to be. How is it for your mental health and your mindfulness, playing music?
I think that's how I approach music.
Okay.
More and more these days, because I'm not playing with too many groups. I play one group. It's a punk band. Well, 90% of the music I do is just meditation and doing just the same exercise over again. Actually, if you want to hang on there 1 second, can I show you something cool I got?
Absolutely, go for it. I'll just fill in while Tadhg goes off. The light has come on. But it's absolutely lashing rain outside here now. It's pretty. Oh, Tadhg is back. Hold on.
I just want to show you just I bought this there the other week.
Oh, I've seen one of these.
Yeah. So like,
oh, that's beautiful.
Sitting down with the piano, and like you can. Like, I do the same thing with piano. I just take a couple of notes and just sit down for hours, and just go off into that world. In my own world, it's like I'm like tunneling, like in outer space or underground, and once the music goes and you go into that kind of repetition, or your brain switches off, your mind, because it's just motor memory, and when your brain switches off, you lose that sense of self, and it's like, I'm just part of something here, and there's the cells in my body just want me to make these ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. I don't understand that, but I'm sure there's some purpose behind it.
But you know what I love about that type, because I talked about people having a certain style in guitar playing, and I love the fact that you think about it, like you said, mathematically, almost like the way you think of guitar playing or notes or music in general, and then you've got like all this going on, and then you play in a punk band, which people see and look, not me, but some people would see as just three chords, just bang, 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 bang. I know it's no Matrix, isn't it, that you're in? Yeah, I know. I used to work with Hugh Cleary a long, long time ago. But I love the fact. I love the idea, the fact that there isn't just one Tadhg when it comes to music. Like you're obviously dipping in and out of different things, and to approach it in a mindful way and a way that's going to help your mental health. That's a perfect way of approaching most things, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's and so I wanted to ask you this because this was written down for me because this is something I don't enjoy doing, and because you've just talked about the idea of being in a group, a circle, and you're on the outside. Do you like going to large gigs?
I don't mind large gigs like,
Okay.
in the O2 or festivals I love,
Do you?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, it's the small, intimate gigs I hate.
What? Why is it the small intimate gigs?
Because there's so much pressure, It's like,
Yeah.
it's supposed to be something special. Like,
Yeah.
if it, like, if you're going to see someone playing the piano for an hour or something, and there's some like if I'm at a gig, I like to be a fly on the wall,
Yeah, I get that as well. I do. I would not go to a festival. You could not pay me enough money to go to a festival, but that's just me. But I want to talk a bit. I want to talk just coming off because again, to talk a bit about your music, and obviously you've mentioned Nirvana. Like, who would be your favorite bands? And to add on to that question, because apparently, Tadhg, when you're 26, that is the time you stop listening to new music. Studies have shown, and to be honest, I think that falls perfectly in line with my music. But yeah, I think it does. But who would be some of your favorite bands?
John Frusciante, he was my biggest influence as a guitar player. Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
They were actually played in the Red Hot Chili Peppers tribute band briefly for one night.
Nice.
He wrote, no. Yeah. After that, I went into heavier stuff like thrash metal. For a while, I was going Sepultura, and but then after that, yes. Also band-wise, Chili Peppers. Dave Matthews Band had a big impression on me for a long time, but I didn't have many bands, that I listened to the same bands obsessively, and I'd listen back and I'd listen the same album, but now I'm going to listen to a different instrument, or a different part, Radiohead.
Yeah.
They were Johnny Greenwood and John Frusciante were definitely my biggest influences. But then I think I got frustrated with the metal because it's like the new metal bands were coming, and I was like,
yeah. we won't say too much about those boys.
Yeah, but it's like you get tied to the music you listen to really when you're 14 or 15.
Of course, yeah.
It doesn't matter what it was. That was the best music, and anything that comes after that is rubbish.
Yeah.
So I stopped kind of listening to new bands around then and started listening to music like jazz. I started listening to jazz, and I think I've only gotten to the realization now that I don't like jazz. Like,
How many years is that then?
20.
Oh, that is dedication to get to a point, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like I think it was the next expectation. Okay, everyone here wants to be rock guitar players, and it's like, what don't we have in Athlone? There's no jazz. Athlone used to have a lot of jazz and jazz guitar players, but then it kind of died down. But that kind of got me into jazz. It was the kind of punk mentality. It's like, what type of music will I get into here that'll annoy people the most?
Yeah, and that does make sense. And it's the opposite of what most people try to do, is where they try to get in on the same thing, and and everything. I shouldn't bring this up, but I'm gonna bring this up. Ed Sheeran, okay, he's the eighth wonder of the world to me, right? And I'm not putting his music down because I'm sure it's good, right? But he sold 150 million albums. It's not that good. He's selling out like 60,000 venues, 60,000 people venues. I don't like. Is it a sense of people just clambering onto the one thing that's maybe slightly different? I know he uses a lot of loops and stuff on stage, and he doesn't have band and things like that, keeping the overheads low, and I like that too. But to me, like, I like the idea of, even if it's to piss someone off, going and exclusively listen to like like acid jazz for a couple of years. But you listened to it for 20 years, though. you really well with it, Tadhg. And I appreciate that. I have to mention Johnny Greenwood because, look, he didn't influence me because I couldn't do what he was doing. I was exclusively chords on a guitar, and I still am. I haven't moved from that. But when I listen to someone like him turning it, again, talking about Nick McCabe already, he's turning it into something that it doesn't sound like a guitar anymore at times, and it's you're kind of trying to figure out what instrument they are using for that. And I love that idea. I love the fact that a band would go out of its way to kind of think, we're going to have 5 instruments on this, and 3 of them are going to be, you're going to have to try and figure out what they are. They're not going to be and you going back, and I used to do that as well with albums. When I go back and listen to, I'm just going to listen to the bass now for this whole album, just the bass parts, and even trying to figure it out, sit down and figure them out. But like, is there this is one of my favorite questions to ask everybody or anybody. Revolver by the Beatles is my favorite album of all time. It's just, I can't see past it, right? Do you have an album off the top of your head that you would call your favorite?
Oh.
No? Don't give me a jazz album, Tadhg. It won't be allowed.
No. So probably something will come to me in a few minutes.
That's the way it always works. But that's all right. I just know because I asked
Incubus.
Which one?
Make Yourself Incubus.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I do like that album, to be fair. But I wasn't expecting that, though. That's interesting. That's the first time Incubus has been mentioned on the podcast.
Yeah, that was the last gig I went to, actually. It was Incubus. And it was the only time I've ever seen them. Yeah, they were a huge influence. I totally forgot about Incubus. They're massive.
Really? I remember a group of people going when I worked in the stores. They were all going to see Incubus. It was the time when Morning View came out, and it was around that time, and everybody was going to see them. And I didn't go see them for some reason. There was something about the... I thought that the guy on the decks was unnecessary. Sometimes, Tadhg, it's sometimes the most ridiculous things you have against, groups.
That's what annoyed me about Linkin Park, and it wasn't that I had a problem with, different elements coming into metal or anything.
Yeah.
I thought it was a bit cheese,
Yeah.
We had rap coming into metal early with Zach De La Rocha. Done great jobs, but
yeah. But sometimes things work. I don't know. I think Incubus would have been the same band without the guy on the decks, basically.
Yeah.
And that's, and I know what you mean. I wasn't a big fan of new metal. The decks was just, look, it was another thing, and it worked well at the time, but it wasn't for me. So Tadhg, with all that aside, with all the music aside, and I know, look, you're a very busy man doing what you're doing. If you did have spare time, what would you do with it?
I'd love to get into some sort of sculpting.
Really?
Yeah. I spent a lot of time the last 2 years just building stone walls out in the backyard.
Right.
And it's the most relaxing thing I've ever done in my life.
Wow.
Just sitting out for days, just it's a different level of relaxing than music. It's I found this really. I build the same stone wall every day. I always put up pictures. I started putting pictures on Facebook during the pandemic. Same thing to annoy people,
Yeah.
I'm going to go out to the garden. I have half an hour. I'm going to build a stone wall, and it collapses every day because it's stone wall. But every day also you push it a bit further and it gets a bit more intricate, you know.
Yeah.
But for months I was just posting pictures of a stone wall on Facebook. But the sculpt like that was, it wasn't posting a picture of a stone wall. It was like, I'm doing months of sculpting on this stone wall because of the situation. That stone wall, those little intricate designs and little patterns that come in, they're a result of the situation that we're in. Like, you know, so I can look at a stone wall and, you know, be like, you know, that's the hours thinking about music or my dad and, you know, all that. That's all my way of getting not thinking about it, you know.
Again, mindfulness, really, you know, and I was talking to my landlady earlier on about mindfulness and all the different things, and you know, we're going to have a surfer on soon. I want to talk about that because I'd be interested in finding more about that. And she said vodka is her mindfulness, but we're not going to promote that in this podcast because that's not right. But Tadhg, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, and I can't believe how quickly it went by.
Yeah, that's lovely. I'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. In person.
Yeah, this is something I really personally wanted to, even, like, I was listening to some of the podcasts, really enjoying them.
Thanks, man.
Great people. And to give me a chance to get out of my own fear of that camera and you know, thank you.
Yeah, no, not at all. It's absolutely our pleasure. Stick with me for a couple of minutes, Tadhg. I'll close it out. I just want to get a picture with you before we finish up. All right. I want to say thanks to a few people. Thank you very much to John Francis for looking after all the technical side of things. Thank you very much to my mum, my dad, granddad, Jer and Calvin, of course. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like I said before, if you would. That'd be brilliant. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can listen to us on the podcast platforms if you don't want to look at us. That we are on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google Podcasts, and there's a couple other ones that I always forget. Once again, Tadhg, thank you very much, and love to your dad as well, obviously.
Thank you.
And to everybody for listening, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place. All the best. Bye.